Now, the story you're about to read is not in any way me trying to scare you. I wanted to write this because it has to do with my childhood, and I just recently found out that what happened is really unnerving for me. Excuse me for my poor grammar, as English is not my native language. It'll be a pretty boring read, as I'm going to describe as much as possible, but I will tell you the creepy part at the end. I am 26 years old, and I live in a city called Breda in the Netherlands. I have lived here my entire life. I lived in a detached house when I was a kid. It was a pretty big house, but it was really old. I never knew my dad. My mom told me a while ago that he was an alcoholic and that he had mistreated my mom before I was born. He left my mom and me while I was still a baby, and she has never seen him since. She never got into another relationship again, so it was just me and my mom who lived in the house. I love her very much, and she has been a great mom. I slept in the attic where I had everything a child could have asked for. I remember that I had a small TV. This must be when I was 10 or 11 years old, on which I always watched cartoons and movies before going to bed. It had one of these timers which you could put on for a certain time, and after that the TV would shut off automatically. My mom slept one floor below me, as my house had 3 floors, the attic being the 3rd floor. I would get in bed at 9 o'clock, but I was allowed to watch TV for half an hour before I would go to sleep. She would put the timer on 30 minutes. She would then go to the living room to read a book or watch TV. After the 30 minutes, I always reset the timer so I could watch another 30 minutes. And I would do this until I heard my mom coming upstairs to go to bed. She usually went to bed at 10:30 p.m. I would then turn off my TV and listen to her preparing herself for bed. I couldn't really hear her closing her bedroom door, as there was a wall between my room and the stairs to my room. I therefore just waited a few minutes, assuming she would be in bed. Then I would turn on the TV again, but with the volume off. I always did this until my mom caught me once. The batteries of the remote controller were low, so the mute button didn't work properly. She sneaked up to my room and got mad, and for some time I wasn't allowed to watch TV before going asleep anymore. I would still do it though, but I would wait a longer time before I turned my TV back on when she would go to bed, as I was afraid that she would catch me doing it again. After about 45 minutes, I sometimes would hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and because of the house being so old, this would make a squeaky sound. I would then quickly turn off my TV and pretend that I was sleeping. I could feel my heart beating as the squeaky sound got louder. I would then hear my bedroom door opening, but I would be too afraid to open my eyes. The door would eventually close again, and I could hear footsteps going down the stairs. This happened a few times. Yesterday I told my mom about this when I was visiting her with my wife. I thought about it as we were talking about my childhood. I asked her if she remembered her checking on me to make sure I wasn't watching TV, and that I would pretend I was asleep. I hoped that she would remember, and that we could laugh about it together. But what she said creeped me out so much that it gave me reason to write this story. She said that she remembered very clearly how she caught me watching TV, but that she always went asleep right away after she went upstairs to her room. She never came into my room to check on me after that. This means that whoever came into my room after these 30 to 45 minutes wasn't my mom. Someone has been inside of our house looking at me thinking I was asleep, and all this time, I thought it was just my mom. She freaked out as well when I told her this, but we both know we can't do anything about it anymore. So when I got home, I started writing this, so that I could at least tell my story to some people. I used to be such a sound sleeper. I'd close my eyes, rest my head on the pillow, and when I opened my eyes again a second later, it'd be lights out. That's how it used to be, at least. A week ago, as I was about to get into bed, I heard a loud noise from downstairs. When I went down to investigate, I found one of the living room windows wide open and the lamp on the table next to it lying on the floor, shattered. I sighed loudly and shut the window tight. I got a dustpan and brush, cleaned up most of what was left of the lamp, and threw it in the trash. I was exhausted by this point, so I groggily walked back up the stairs, into my bedroom, and into bed. The warmth of the bed was comforting. I was completely relaxed. That's why I was so curious as to why I couldn't fall asleep. As I said before, I was a sound sleeper. I never had trouble sleeping, especially when I was tired and wanted to sleep. So what was eating at me in the back of my mind? Keeping me awake. That was when the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end and a terrifying shiver went down my spine.
Are you awake?
A quiet voice whispered in my ear. I froze. Whoever was speaking was so close I could feel their warm breath on my ear. I didn't react. I tried my hardest to pretend to be asleep, to hope whoever this was would just leave me alone. After a few minutes, I could no longer feel their breath on my ear, but I still didn't move. I didn't want to until I saw the sunrise. I have never been happier than when I saw that first ray of light the next morning. I jumped out of bed, got dressed, grabbed my car keys, and shot out the front door, having just enough time to look at the now empty table which once had a lamp. I drove to my closest friend's house and told him what had happened. He assured me I could stay with him for a few nights and called the police for me while I sipped some coffee. The police questioned me, as you'd expect, and I gave them my house keys so they could search to see if they could find any evidence. They came back that afternoon to return my keys and told me they found no sign that anyone was still in my house. Unconvinced, or maybe just nervous, I stayed at my friend's house for the rest of the week, finally returning home on Sunday. My friend offered to stay with me, but I assured him it wouldn't be a problem. I did cautiously check the house again, though, just to be sure. Once I was finally confident, I crawled into bed and closed my eyes to drift into what I hoped to be my first pleasant sleep this week. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I reached down to see what was wrong and found my hands covered in blood.
I guess you were awake,
the voice whispered. A condition called false awakening occurs when you're dreaming that you've woken up, but are still in deep sleep. Dreaming that you have woken, believing you're awake and even going about some of the actions you would, such as starting the kettle or collecting clothes for a shower, even going outside to check the mail. But it is still a dream, and sometimes that's when things start to get scary. Imagine it. You've woken up, nothing unusual there. You've risen and dressed decently, then walked through your home. Everything seems normal. You fill the kettle and turn it on, then lean against the counter, trying to remember what your dream was about. You feel that it was a strange one, but the details evade you. Shaking it off, you glance at the clock and frown. You thought it was much earlier than that, but you simply assume you were just very tired after sitting up so late last night surfing the net. Pulling on your shoes, you head outside and down the drive. The day is warm. The sun bright, perhaps a little too bright, but again, you just assume it's probably because you had been up so late. Checking your letterbox, you're surprised to find a pile of letters. They're plain envelopes, and you open the top one. Inside is a plain piece of paper with one word printing crisply on it. You. You're not sure what to think of it. Somewhere on the street, a dog barks, and you look up at the sound. Looking down the street, you then look down the other side of the street. Usually there are people out at this time of day. The elderly man across the street is usually doing his gardening, but the street looks almost abandoned. You start to feel unsettled as you stare back down at the letters and the piece of paper saying, you. So you open the next letter and the next, growing more anxious as you do, until you're staring at a number of almost identical pieces of paper that, when read one after the other, read, "You are still asleep." The brightness of the day suddenly dims as thick, dark clouds rapidly fill the sky. It grows cold and the color is sucked from the world around you. There's a dog barking in the distance, though it sounds much more threatening now. A cold wind makes you shiver, and you even flinch when a stark white piece of paper slaps against your calf. Leaning down, you pick it up. Your eyes widen, and the foreboding feeling overwhelms you as you read the rough scrawl on the paper. Enjoy your nightmare.